All right, well, I know our sessions are tight today, so we'll go ahead and we'll get started. First things first, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Sandra Dainora. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Sitter City. We are a digital platform that helps millions of families across the US find trusted and reliable care. Part of our mission is to make childcare work, and as part of my role, I'm really focused on helping to build technology that simplifies the way families and sitters connect and helps people hire with confidence. The work that we do helps make everyday life easier for parents and provides kids with loving caregivers and joy-filled environments. I think something so important for all kids. And I'm also mom to a 6-year-old first grader, obsessed with all things Lego, obsessed with all things hockey and shipwrecks. So if you want to know anything about the Titanic, I'm definitely your person. A year in pandemic can do that. Today, I'm planning to share some of the things I've learned as part of my journey as a woman in tech. The truth is that being a working mom is definitely a struggle every day. The system really just wasn't built for working moms, and the last 18 months amidst a crushing pandemic definitely has put, I think, all of us to the test. So I'm going to say it out loud. It is hard, but as challenging and as wonderful as motherhood is, it doesn't have to impede our career goals. The fact is as mothers, our work actually gets better and our efficiency goes way up as we choose to invest our time in meaningful things. If it's not meaningful, it is time away from our families. And so I want to share a few tips I've learned along the way on turning motherhood into a superpower. First and foremost, don't hide your motherhood. Being a mother is really a strength and competitive advantage. Anyone who told you that being a working mother makes you any less of an employee or that planning to have kids in the future will mean you have to sacrifice your career entirely is inherently wrong. For me, I think one of the things I've learned is the executive level functioning skills you learn as being a mother are actually invaluable in the workplace. Multitasking is something moms are navigating what feels like almost every minute of the day. I'm sure I'm not the only one who is firing away Slacks or emails while waiting in a pediatrician's office, or that is actually pumped at work while muted on a conference call. Nursing, on its own is pretty much a full-time job. You may have seen some of the Instagram memes and posts that a year of breastfeeding actually translates to roughly 1,800 hours. So keep in mind, a full-time job with a 40-hour work week and 3 weeks of vacation comes in at 1,960. So definitely a big challenge. Conflict resolution and dealing with difficult personalities are also really translatable skills. If you've ever had to deal with toddler tantrums, you know exactly what I'm talking about. When a 3-year-old doesn't think a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is cut the right way, things can go downhill quickly. But balancing these moments really just takes patience and being level-headed, and in some scenarios, serious negotiation skills and really the ability to influence. List goes on, and as parents, we're really constantly navigating, time management, organization, prioritization, and problem solving. On Monday mornings, I sometimes feel like I'm balancing all of those at once, and without fail, there's usually four issues or last minute things that are coming up that I need to tackle to get my son out the door for school on time. And it's easy to overlook those moments as trivial tasks in your day. But the reality is these are all skills that translate meaningfully in the office, whether it is working on a new feature, navigating a sticky bug, or thinking about a consumer pain point. These are all things that definitely translate. And I agree, sometimes even a banana definitely takes things a totally different corner. My next tip is to be unapologetic. I'm sure many of you have been in situations where you felt like you've had to apologize to others while balancing family and work time. I've said sorry for having to do annual checkups for my son. I've said sorry for prioritizing parent and teacher conferences. And I've said sorry because of the guilt that I feel like I carry when I thought I was doing a poor job at home or at work and just trying to juggle it all. Little did I realize I was also carrying that same apologetic use of sorry when I was late to a meeting, or if I wanted to ask a question. I used sorry in executive team meetings when I was a subject expert on particular topics. And for me, the light bulb moment really came when a former colleague actually called me out on it. I hadn't noticed it on my own, and when they said it, became so obvious to me how much I'd been relying on sorry as a crutch for so many things, and how widely it was actually happening for others too. As part of their feedback, they flagged I'd also routinely raise my voice at the end of a sentence when I was sharing a point of view, and it actually made a statement kind of sound more like a question and gave me an out if others disagreed. And so showing my strong convictions and point of view was definitely something I wanted to make sure I handled. And as women, I think we also tend to be really defensive or have an explanation for why we do the things that we do, why we feel the way that we feel, and why our circumstances or surroundings are the way that they are. We use sorry as a way to deflect if we don't want to create conflict, and as a means to interject when you have different points of view or when you believe you should be respectful. I think this year, the number of times people are saying sorry for having kids and spouses and dogs popping up in the background or interrupting a meeting definitely ranked almost as highly as the number of times I've heard people say, "You're still muted," or "I'm going to go ahead and share my screen." But for me, the constant apologies were an unconscious habit. And so that's something I've really tried to be more mindful of when I catch myself starting to say sorry. And at Sitter City, our culture definitely leans into bringing your whole self to work. And that means that there are kids that are popping by to say hi, dogs that are barking, school conferences overlapping with meetings, and days when you're just exhausted from the grind of parenting. And for others, bringing your whole self means focusing on self-care, making space for a therapist appointment, or going for a walk in the middle of the day just to get some headspace or time to think. And instead of apologizing for it, we talk about it, since we know others are navigating their own work-life integration. And sharing and being transparent when you're vulnerable actually helps brings acceptance to others. And so as an executive, that's a behavior I really want to model for others, so it's clear that it's something important in our company culture. We shouldn't have to apologize for being who we are or seeking context that helps us do our jobs better. And at the end of the day, as women, we traditionally underpromise and overdeliver. Our work matters, our opinions matter, and the insights we bring matter. And so bring that strength in the way that you connect with others, and don't be apologetic for it. And I think one way I try to think about putting it in practice is, instead of saying sorry, thank people for their patience when you're late, or ask, is it a good time for me to jump in with a question, instead of saying, hey, sorry, I've got a question. And so really just, I think, a good way just to try to provide that entry point without having to apologize for it. I think many of us also really struggle when it comes to our own self-promotion and talking about our accomplishments, which ultimately can hold us back. I know I'm not alone in battles with imposter syndrome. I think there's a great session today focused on just that. And I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't feeling like I was a fraud and didn't deserve to be where I was. And even when I went on maternity leave, I felt I was going to be less qualified or not sharp when I came back to the office. And I'd encourage all of you to think back on your own journey. Have you ever been in a situation, whether it was a meeting or a job interview, where you had to talk about your accomplishments? Did you, talk freely? Did you use we, or did you use I when you shared? And I think that's a place that women often struggle with self-promotion, largely because I think we're actually conditioned from a young age not to speak openly about our achievements. I think sometimes you can actually feel like it is being impolite or uncourteous if we try to brag about our achievements and what we have to offer. And the truth is, we oftentimes downplay our successes and the things that actually come easy to us. And we forget the things that maybe come easily to us are huge milestones for someone else. A few years ago, I actually went to an International Women's Day event, and it was a Women's Tech Makers Conference at Google. And that was one place that really changed my perspective on it. During it, there's actually a workshop that was called I Am Remarkable, which is a Google initiative that's focused on empowering women and other underrepresented groups to celebrate their achievements in the workplace and beyond, and really just breaking modesty norms and glass ceilings. And the whole premise was pretty simple. During the workshop, you actually got a sheet of paper, and the task was basically to fill the page with all the things that made you remarkable personally and professionally. And really it started with I am remarkable because, and you had time to think about it and write it down. And then we actually broke into small groups and read out loud all the things that actually made us remarkable. And it was just this amazing and powerful moment to hear all these women sharing and being advocates for themselves. And so I think a question I'd ask all of you is, what makes you remarkable? Looking back at some of my own accomplishments, I'll share some of the things that I'm proud of personally and professionally. I'm remarkable because I prioritize reading a bedtime story to my son every night. And despite, how tired I am or how many emails I need to catch up on, I feel like I'm remarkable because I was able to care for my family and help my son navigate kindergarten during a global pandemic. I'm remarkable because I championed for recognizing Pregnancy Loss and Awareness Month in our DEI calendar, and shared my own personal journey of loss and grief and mental health with the entire company. And I'm remarkable because I nursed my son for 14 months while still working a full-time job. And I think, as I look back at that conference, two things that for me really struck me. One, it's not bragging if it's based off of facts. And two, accomplishments don't speak for themselves. So I really make an effort to own the things that I do, be proud of my achievements, both at home and in the office, and celebrate me and own my accomplishments. There's so much power that comes in owning the things that you've done. And so use that same mindset to highlight your achievements, but also the ones of others around you. There's power in elevating the team that you work with. Like many, I wanted to also spend some time talking about boundaries. I embraced probably the first, kind of days and weeks of the pandemic with probably like many of you, wanting to be baking, trying out new recipes, Zoom wine nights. And, I had this like master plan about how I was going to have all this extra time for exercise and new hobbies. And that quickly disappeared as dishes began piling up in the sink, laundry still was unfolded, dust bunnies were under our bed, and hours of back-to-back video calls left me pretty just exhausted and drained. And that continuous juggle of work and parenting around the clock has just been an exhaustion that many parents just aren't used to, myself included. And it has been a marathon, to say the least. And really, to combat a lot of the stress and signs of burnout, I've really been making a conscious effort to actually create space to find time to refuel and recharge. And some of this really starts by setting your own boundaries, including with technology. I think with everyone working from home or starting to come kind of back to the office, it really is much more difficult to actually delineate personal time from work time. And for me, one way I actually combat it is my family actually embraces a no devices rule. So at dinner time, we actually completely take a break from screens, and it's really a time for all of us to be 100% present together. And you better believe my son definitely keeps us accountable to it, and largely because these are really just precious and few moments. And so we really treat it as sacred time. And my peers know that I'll be unavailable then, and it's definitely a place of respite and helps me clear my head, and really more than anything, just helps us connect and laugh and find joy in the day. And I'm also vocal with my teams when there are family related items I need to address. So I share updates in Slack. I post school appointments in my work calendar. I want other people to actually recognize that this time is equally as important. And a few weeks ago, we actually were heads down and firming up a new strategy statement, and had an important lunch meeting with our team to review some of the final language that I drafted, but I actually wasn't there. I was actually cheering on my son at his summer camp hockey game, and he asked me to be there, and I made sure that I was there, and I shared pictures of the team of the game when everything was done. And so really just creating and embracing these boundaries is really just a valuable tool for your team to model that it's actually okay to take space and protect time for your own priorities. We inherently want to say yes to everything and to be the perfect mom and the perfect employee and juggle it all. But the reality is time is just such a precious commodity, and it requires thoughtful time and prioritization. With my son, for example, I'm so mindful of carving out time to play outside, time to do reading, when there's things that he needs to focus on. And I don't even blink when I need to say no or not right now. And I think for me, a question is, why is it 100 times harder to do the same thing at work? And I've learned to just try to hold some of that accountability when I'm in the office. Think about what is urgent, think about what is important, and be really ruthless in maintaining those boundaries to combat so many of the many competing priorities. Every Monday, I actually have a 30-minute meeting with myself. I map out my priorities and intentions for the week, and really think about, what adds long-term value to the org or the team, what has a time pressure associated, and really lets me think about how do I not overextend myself? How can I be more mindful? And help me acknowledge that when I say yes to something, what am I actually saying no to actively? Keeping those boundaries in place, finds space to focus and helps me think about what actually will move the needle, and not just the easy to-dos that give you those dopamine hits when you're crossing it off of the list. In my career, I've also navigated a lot of insensitive and disrespectful and honestly outright offensive comments, either directed toward me or other working parents. No matter if the comment was intentional or not, microaggressions can definitely be degrading or downright hurtful. I will never forget the time when I was pregnant with my son. I had a former male coworker say to me, you aren't planning to take a full maternity leave, are you? And while I think that the comment itself may not have been intentional, the colleague respected my work and I know, was going to be feeling the loss when I left, but it really left me questioning on how do I actually respond to that, or what do I even do? And I ultimately just let it slide and didn't do anything about it, since I actually just didn't even know how to approach the situation. And I started seeing similar situations popping up for other working parents who also faced, offhanded comments that made assumptions or stereotyped them based off of the fact that they had children. And I see it happening for women all the time in larger meetings as well, where they're maybe getting interrupted or talked over, or kind of male coworkers are maybe making the same point as a woman and being credited for the thought. And there's a report that came out from leanin.org and McKinsey and Company where it actually identified that women in the workplace actually experience microaggressions much more regularly than men do, and can include things like having to provide more evidence of your competence, or even being mistaken as somebody who's a bit more junior. And with it, day by day, slight by slight, a lot of these microaggressions can actually leave just a really lasting impression on morale. And so I'd encourage all of you, when you identify that a microaggression is taking place, consider calling it out, or thinking about how you can actually find your voice to raise awareness. And oftentimes, doing that will actually stop somebody in their tracks and really create an opportunity for discussion, or a moment that you can actually work through together to create, a more healthy and open workplace. For me, really just thinking about how to stop them in their tracks is so important, really just to ensure that we are not impacting our self-worth, either personally or professionally. My next tip is to think about how to actually create your own tribe. For me, I found that the best way to actually get through things sometimes is just surrounding yourself with people who you can turn to when you need it. 3 years ago, I was fortunate to have one of my most impactful tribes come together, and it was something that actually came through pretty organically. The 12 other moms in my son's preschool class just actually started a group text chain. And that text chain really has helped me with everything from mentorship, cheerleading when I was having a bad day, being a sounding board, getting advice, or even navigating new chapter books for early readers and summer camp suggestions. And using that tribe as a model, I've actually tried to think about how I can create more of them. So I've now created, a circle for kind of product things that I use for work-related topics. I use it to talk about roadmaps and goal setting and strategy development and research. I have a separate tribe for past coworkers that I actually use to connect on particularly thorny problems, or if I need help working through a creative block. And the one thing that they all have in common is that they're all there to help me and to help each other. With everything being so hard these days, sometimes just finding a tribe that can help take a little bit of the weight off and give you advice or a much needed laugh can really be a way to feed you in different ways and are just so rich. So look for a way that you can actually have a support system. I think for me, what I've come to realize is that I can't take care of others if I'm not taking care of myself. And learning that asking for help isn't a sign of weakness, but really a sign of strength is just so critical to being both a parent, a better parent, and a better leader. And lastly, share what you know. That's part of why I'm here today, is really just to share all that I know in hopes that I can prepare, the next generation of young leaders and provide support, in the Chicago community. I'm not a perfect mom. I'm not a perfect leader. I don't have all the answers, and I'd be lying if I told you that I had it all figured out. But I'm sure if you ask my family and coworkers, they can think of countless moments where things didn't go to plan exactly as I'd hoped. But when these moments do come up, I make a point to learn from them. Share with others. And when you share with others, a lot of that knowledge just helps improve all levels of an organization, helps you develop collaboration, helps inspire new solutions and new ways of doing things that simulate change. And most importantly, it just makes people feel good. So looking out for others and helping to lift them up is just a great way to work through it all. So with that, definitely would love to see if there's any questions from the wider audience. I'm happy to help answer anything.
Hey. My question, kind of, you started to speak around guilt around taking maternity leave. How do you feel, especially when you're in an organization where fathers tend to take significantly less leave than mothers? How do you deal with that guilt or fight for organizational change?
Yeah, I can say when I was pregnant with my son, there were really no policies or guardrails, and it was really hard because I was actually probably one of the first people in the company that had been pregnant, and there just wasn't like a great system in place on how to even navigate that as a whole. And I think more than anything, just being upfront and starting to have a dialogue or have a conversation about it is just an important topic. I would say, for me personally, the guilt never really goes away. Some of that may just be my upbringing, where I always feel like there's more that I could be doing or should be doing. But I think encourage you to kind of talk with the leadership team, talk with kind of the HR team, and really understand how do your policies actually line up and support working families as a whole, especially as as we need to think about how there's greater equality at home and equality in the workplace, that some of it starts just by having a conversation. As hard as it may seem, that I'm sure that there's probably others that are feeling the same way or thinking the same way. And so just starting that, I think, is just like such an important way to begin the process.
Definitely. Thank you. Oh, and one Titanic fact, if you can.
So of the 4 funnels that were on the Titanic, only 3 of them were working funnels.
Oh,
the 4th one was actually just for decoration.
Awesome. Good to know. Thank you.
And I think a good call out in the chat as well on just thinking about other words that we can use that don't appropriate other cultures. I think kind of having a team, squad, village. Thank you for the call out there. I think appreciate that.
So true. Hi, Sandra. This was such a useful talk, like especially in these times. Like you can see, I'm doing my conference with my son here. I wanted to know more about your career, like a quick snapshot to understand how you got here. It's so amazing that you have this clarity and understanding.
I would say part of it actually started by having I think people who I could look to for mentors, or who were open to giving me advice or asking for feedback along the way throughout my career. When I think just like some background on me, I went to school for anthropology and studied Paleolithic cave art. I decided after living in Spain that I probably was not ready to kind of spend the next decade in academia. So I ended up going to work at a law firm through a family friend. And one of the women partners that I actually was working for basically started me down this path that I didn't even know was there for me, where she said, go work for my husband. He's working at a startup, and I think that this is like the right fit for you. I'd also taken some coding classes in college. My mom at the time said that they were a waste of time. She now says I would never say that. I don't remember that, but definitely just kind of arming myself with technology was something that I was always passionate about. And so I ended up, kind of transitioning to work for a startup, and that led one thing to another, where I then went to work for Amy in the History Channel, focusing on commerce, and then went to Discover Card, was working for Chicago Tribune. I worked for Oprah Winfrey, and kind of the end of her show and the launch of her TV networks. I worked for Grubhub for 5 years, and then to Sitter City. And kind of along the way, there wasn't always kind of like a clear-cut decision or career path. But for me, I think I was always looking for places where I could continue to learn and surround myself with people who were passionate and curious and and smart. And really for me, kind of growing up, my dad always had these metaphors of, you can choose to take the local train, or the express train. And it's kind of up to you on which one you want to go on and which one you want to take. And so for me, I always kind of kept looking for the express train and finding the ways that would continue to let me keep learning, since I think that's one of the things that I was always really passionate about.
Definitely, that makes sense, Sandra, and it's so reassuring to hear that you have done so many great things and you have come to the same conclusion for someone like me to confirm that it's okay to be a parent and do everything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something here that I think the question from Lindsay on how long did it take you for you to turn your motherhood into a superpower? I would say it is not something that, I think you embrace right away, that it really comes with learning and appreciating the many things that motherhood actually can bring, right? Like during my maternity leave, I didn't know up from down. And then I came back to the office afterwards, and really everything was the same, but kind of different. But really, it was a place where I didn't actually worry about, was I staying in the office long enough, or was I doing the things that I needed to do? That at the end of the day, it focused on the things that mattered. And for me, it was always my family and the things that I knew would help move the business forward. And trying to find the balance that worked for me and worked for my family, was a big thing. So I think another question from Brittany. So if microaggression is happening every day from the same person, it was dismissed when you brought it up to senior leadership, when is the time to bring it up to HR? So for me, I like to have a really open relationship with my HR team and really look at them as kind of peers and talk about it as often as I can, because I think those microaggressions are things that can really, bring down kind of a company culture, bring down sort of your feeling of worth in some ways. I remember many situations where I've had times when there have been meetings where there are, kind of constant interruptions or people who are being talked over. And I think one of the things I've tried to balance is really just trying to, like, when I also recognize it's happening to others, where there are places where I can also help kind of counter or balance that situation. And I think kind of being able to acknowledge it sort of both in a meeting, but then also talk about it. For me, I think I like to just talk about it early, and I like to talk about it often, especially if I see that there's a pattern that is happening. And I think, one of the comments on, not being great at thinking on your feet, I feel the same way sometimes, that sometimes I actually will just sort of take a step back and pause. And sometimes actually just taking that extra minute helps me. Like, I sometimes just want to make sure that I'm not just blurting out kind of like the first thing that comes to mind, that I want to be mindful about, how can I actually create or introduce a dialogue and have it be a meaningful kind of thought-provoking conversation, versus me just being kind of a counteract to kind of whatever I'm seeing. But such great questions. I think we are now just at time. So, happy to stay and share any other perspectives. But I know that we've got some other sessions coming up.